What is up, my friends? We are back, myself and Mr. David Lynch, going to go through the game at the weekend. Liverpool's 3-0 victory over Iriola's Bournemouth. We're also going to have a little look ahead to the game coming up on Wednesday. But David, firstly, happy with the weekend?
Yeah, thought it was another strong performance, and we spoke after the Milan game in terms of it was so important to bounce back, but obviously the Milan game was in the Champions League. You still felt that the need was there for Liverpool to get a positive result, positive performance in the Premier League after that kind of disappointing game against Nottingham Forest, and just thought they absolutely did that. I mean, a 3-0 win, it was pretty comfortable for the most part. I mean, been a bit of talk as in the post match about kind of Bournemouth's threat, but for me, so much of that came when the game was already 3-0, and that will naturally happen. I'm sure Slot will still be on at the players and moaning at them and saying, we should be tighter in those moments, but there's going to be kind of a natural letting your foot off the gas a little bit. And so I thought most of Bournemouth's threat came in that period, and prior to that, Liverpool had just been pretty dominant, really dominated the game in midfield, creating chances and obviously scoring 3 really good goals as well. So thought a pretty consummate performance, and just felt like it just made the Forest game seem like a little bit of a one-off, really, and a blip, because they've been so convincing since that. So it was, really, really encouraging, both in terms of performance, the result, the goals, and everything about it. Really, a really positive day, I thought.
Yeah, I echo everything you've said there. It was just a perfect afternoon for us. 3-0 victory. Arne Slot start now as Liverpool manager. He's played 6 games all in, 5 victories, 1 defeat, 13 goals scored, just 2 goals conceded. I mean, I think it's fair to say, David, he's had a good start. You don't want to get too carried away, but certainly he hasn't dropped the ball in the early days. One result, as we said this last week, we conceded 1 goal in the league and we lost the game. It's pretty unfortunate, but all in all, I've been very impressed with the start. I'm sure you have as well.
Well, that's it. I think even after the Forest game, I felt like we were talking about the idea that Liverpool still looked solid in that game defensively. They just conceded a very, very good goal. But, they have generally, apart from being 3-0 up in games, so I think about United and then Bournemouth, they're the only moments really where Liverpool have lacked a bit of solidity. I've felt, that's been the rare moments in games where they've looked easy to play through and easy to score against, even allowing for that Forest result. So I do think that there's just a really good structure there. And generally outside of that Forest game, again, I think that the attacking structure has been really good. They've always looked threatening. So, we are only 6 games in, but I think you can say that, the early signs of it is this is a nicely balanced team that can score goals and keep them out. And I mean, if you do that consistently over a season, you'll be up there challenging for trophies. So, yeah, you don't want to get carried away. Totally get on board with that. Although I would always say to all supporters that they should be the ones who are allowed to get carried away. If anything, why not? Because the misery is always around the corner in football anyway, so you might as well get carried away. But but from my perspective, I thought, it loads and loads of positive signs, and you just hope that they can keep that going now.
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack from this weekend. I want to start off with team selection for the game against Bournemouth. Obviously, we knew there was no Alison Becker, but how nice was it to know that Quivine was just going to step in? It's going to be steady as she goes, no major errors. It's like Alison wasn't missing. It's so refreshing, so nice, and so calming to know that Quivine can come in as a number 2 and we won't miss a beat. And I guess that's part of the reason why I'm still shell shocked that nobody was willing to put down 25 or 30 million from him this summer. Your thoughts on Quivin Kelleher's performance?
Well, I think it just justifies again Liverpool's valuation. I think you could come at it from Kelleher's point of view maybe and say that they're kind of blocking a move, but he's worth it. He's worth the money. You consider his age, the experiences he already has, and the level of performance when he comes in completely cold like that, and just looks like he's absolutely spot on every single time. That world class really in everything he does. His shot stopping is fantastic. He's great with the ball at his feet. You just saw more of that again. It's exactly what you say there about it's unbelievable to me that more clubs weren't in for him, and there wasn't bigger interest than Forest throwing in that late bid, because he's just a fantastic goalkeeper. And you weren't worried even when you heard about that Alisson news at the press conference. It just didn't concern anyone, because the guy who's coming in as the backup is absolutely fantastic. And I thought he proved it again. Some really, really good saves, some great moments, and always comfortable in build up in the way that Alisson is, potentially even possibly better in that regard. He's a really, really comfortable footballer. So it's great for Liverpool to have a backup of that quality, and he showed it again, I thought.
I think his demeanour as well. It's very calm. It's very reassuring. Like Alisson Becker, to be fair, we've been blessed in the goalkeeping department in recent times. I want to move on now to another big decision, I guess, in the starting 11. And that was, of course, to bring Darwin back in. What can I say, David, except that was Darwin Nunez perfectly encapsulated in one performance. That goal, he makes it. He finishes it. He had no right to win that header and lay it off to Mohamed Salah. I thought it was a very encouraging performance from Darwin Nunez.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think we talked on the last time we spoke, actually, was kind of, Jota had started so many of the games. We kind of starting to think, does the manager not fancy Nunez? He's left him out even after an international break where he didn't go away. You do start to think about these things, but I think that was kind of a little bit show of trust, wasn't it, in him, that he was thrown into the starting 11 for this one. And I really don't think he let Slot down. As you say, the goal's outrageous, really. Left-footed from that angle. Really, the moment he cuts in and hits it, didn't think that was hitting the back of the net. But he's capable of those spectacular goals. But it was the other elements of his game, I think, that will most please the manager and what were most satisfying to watch, really, just watching the game from the stands. As you say, the build-up, the flick onto Salah. There were quite a few moments where he gets the ball into feet, lays it off, and makes his run in behind. Quite tidy on the ball in certain moments, which again is the one thing you want him to do a little more of. And the pressing was really good. Nicks the ball a couple of times and is really sort of harrying their defenders and making it difficult for them. So it's an interesting one now, because I think, Jota kind of, his last couple of games, he's faded a little bit. He's not been as good as he maybe was at the very start of the season. So is there a little bit of a battle going on in that centre-forward position? And clearly Nunez trusted in that one, but what happens next? What happens in midweek? What happens with the Premier League game that follows that? We'll start to learn a little bit more about, who maybe Slot is favouring in this moment. But it is a really interesting battle, and hopefully it kind of pushes them both onto higher levels. And because we've seen that from Nunez now, that was a really good performance, and hopefully that is helped by the competition. Same happens to Jota now, and he tries to come back firing, and that's good news for Liverpool if that happens.
It is, and I think we can probably throw a third name into the mix now. We've seen keep saying Federico, excuse me, it's Federico Chiesa, come off the bench, and I thought it was interesting, as we mentioned before we start recording, he came on centrally, which I guess he did play most of his time at Juventus, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was about 34% through the middle, which is interesting to think Arne Slot views him in that way as well. Do you think that's how we can expect Arne Slot to utilise him moving forward, or do you think that he is there to provide cover and competition right across the front three?
I think it's an option. I mean, like I say, we're talking about the competition there in that central role, and if neither Nunez or Jota can nail it down, and Chiesa is absolutely smashing it in training, looking impressive when he comes on, there's every chance he gets himself into the team as that centre forward. I still do think that his initial way in is being the Salah backup and picking up minutes there off the bench, and maybe looking forward to midweek, where there's maybe starts available, then maybe that's the side that he comes in on, or the part of the attack. But that central role, as you say, I just think there is maybe a chance for someone to nail it down now. Maybe that will be Nunez or Jota, but if Chiesa can play there, the manager clearly trusts him in that position, then maybe that provides an opportunity for him to get into the team on a kind of more permanent basis, really. And I was speaking to someone about the statistical profile that he has, really, before he signed, and he was talking about the idea that kind of got a lot of similarities to Jota, actually, which, so again, that shows you that he probably can thrive in that central role. And it'd be really interesting now to throw him in the mix there, if it is a three-way fight for that starting role in the number 9 position. That's going to be really interesting to watch. But again, it just comes back to, I just think it benefits Liverpool to have players contesting for positions, because you see what's happening on the left-hand side at the moment, where Gakpo and Diaz are both absolutely playing out of the skin. You can have similar thing going on across all the front line, then Liverpool in a really, really good position.
Absolutely. We've got 6 outstanding forwards. Jadon Dan's, of course, coming through as well. Lewis Kumas out on loan, doing well. It is definitely optimistic thoughts for us Liverpool fans with regards to an attacking intent. I want to just go back. You touched on Luis Diaz. It would be unfair of us not to give him his flowers for his performance. I thought he was unplayable, David, is the only word I can come up with. Just absolutely sensational.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a kind of crazy start to the season on the basis of what we were talking about so much over the summer, which is that Liverpool interest in Anthony Gordon, the idea that it was there was early in the window certainly some potential maybe for Diaz to move on and maybe that kind of direct swap to happen for Liverpool, but obviously that didn't happen. And in the end, he's starting to look like a really, really good fit for Arne Slot's type of football, isn't it? He's, a lot more focused on what he can do in the final third, getting him into better positions, and he's showing a finishing ability as well that we didn't really see last season. I mean, he had 8 Premier League goals, was it last season, and he's already on 5 now. And he's putting finishes away like ones where he slips it under Kepa with his left foot. Again, finishes that people didn't think he had in his locker. So really, really impressive start to the season. I think Saturday kind of typified it. But, if you can keep this going, I mean, how many goals is he going to get this season? He's scoring at an unbelievable rate. And so, yeah, long may that continue.
I think I've segued us into the conversation now about extensions and player contracts because Luis Diaz is one who is rumoured to be on a very reasonable wage at Liverpool Football Club compared to probably those who he's competing with for the starting berths up top. Do you have anything on the club's want or desire to tie him down to a longer deal?
Yeah, so I believe that the wage is not quite what has been previously reported, which I think was around 55,000 a week, wasn't it? I think it is a little bit higher than that, so he's not quite on sort of a pittance, so to speak. Although I wouldn't mind earning that myself, but he's got around. He's just into 3 years left now, isn't he? Or just slightly less than that, 2 and quite a bit. So I can't see with everything that's going on around Liverpool, the lads who are down to 1 year, Canate, for example, being down to 2. I just can't see that being a priority anytime soon. Really, I think that I think from Diaz's perspective, and you can clearly see in some of the stories that were coming out, there'd be a desire for him to sign an improved contract, absolutely. But for Liverpool, it just won't be a priority at the moment, and that's very much my understanding. They're not really in any rush to offer him a new deal because he's got such a while left on the current one.
You would have to think, though, if you're Luis Diaz, and, one thing I've been critical of these owners for a lot of stuff, but one thing I will always say is they have rewarded people who've performed well. They've incentivized their contracts in that way. You do want to also get that balance, I suppose, between keeping Luis Diaz contractually sorted out, but keeping him happy as well. You don't want him feeling like he's been underpaid for his services. So I certainly hope we don't see it as another situation like Trent, Mohammed and Virgil where it gets right down to the wire.
Yeah, that's it. And Liverpool have got to be careful with those because, you're in a comfortable situation now, which is that you've basically got 3 years left. But then obviously you reach the summer, it gets to 2 years. Things start to get a little bit more shaky then in terms of what interest you can fend off, whether the player starts to look for more money elsewhere. So it does put you in a tricky position, really. So it's something Liverpool have to keep an eye on in a way that they haven't with the lads who've got down to 1 year. In a way that they certainly haven't with Canate, which I think is it's not spoken about enough, really, the fact that he's inside 2 years now. That really does need to get sorted. So, yeah, Diaz is one of those that, they have to be careful about. But, of course, you kind of think that that's weighing on the mind a little bit with that Gordon interest they had. And maybe they think that that's a situation they could explore whether Diaz were to move on. So, yeah, a lot of spinning plates, and I wouldn't fancy being a sporting director myself.
I just want to draw your attention to something that Paul Joyce said. I found it very interesting personally. I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but he was speaking about the situation that Richard Hughes has inherited. And I think that is fair. This is certainly not a situation of Richard Hughes' own making. He's inherited this very difficult situation, particularly with Trent, and I want to stay on him for the moment, where he came into the club, Richard Hughes, and Trent is inside his last year. Nothing to do with Richard Hughes, but it almost feels like it is a bit of a game of cat and mouse, as Paul Joyce described it. We've heard from Trent this weekend that he's very focused on legacy, very focused on winning trophies, wants to be captain of the football club in the future. All of the 3 players, and I guess let's focus on Trent for a second, they seem to want to stay or are giving out vibes that they would like to stay at Liverpool Football Club. That's how I'm interpreting it as a fan anyway. But of course, you're still anxious as these things aren't resolved. With the Trent situation, surely we've got to see some movement on this soon.
Yeah, that's the one that I absolutely expect movement on soon. I totally agree with you. Very much my understanding that all 3 players would like to stay. I think they've all kind of shown the hand in that regard with the sort of what they've said in interviews recently. So Liverpool will kind of privately, I imagine, be happy about that. You don't want to be the one going to them begging and trying to tie them down. I think if the fact that all 3 players are wanting to stay, that gives you a little bit of an upper hand in negotiations. But you can have the upper hand in negotiations as much as you want, but we're fast closing in on January, where all three players will be able to talk to other clubs. They will start to be able to gain leverage then in negotiations, and that will tip the scales a little bit, because for Trent Alexander-Arnold, for example, if whether he wants to go to Real Madrid or not, and I believe his preference is to stay at Liverpool, you can absolutely use them in this position. You can use them to leverage a good wage. And, you look at what Jude Bellingham did in terms of his move to Real Madrid, and how long he kept Liverpool on a string for in that process. Very much using them to kind of make sure he got the best contract, the best offer at Real Madrid that he could. So, and all players do these things. These kind of negotiations are confrontational and a little bit sneaky at times. So, Liverpool have got to be careful. I think you don't really want to get to January with all three outstanding, because they will then use the interest that is in them from other clubs to kind of to nail you down really in contract negotiations. So I think it's crucial months ahead, really.
Trent seems like, I don't want to say a no-brainer, but it certainly seems like the one of the three that there are no thoughts about how many years he has left in his legs and stuff like that. The local boy, vibes, signs are good. He's got up 100 goals and assists, or 100 goal contributions now already at Liverpool Football Club at the age of 25. With Mohamed Salah, over the last two league games, we've probably seen why there's, I don't want to say a hesitancy, but a caution around his future. I think we've seen over these last two league games, not so much AC Milan, but he's dropped off a little bit with regards to his output in the final third. The work rate is always there with Mohamed Salah, a tremendous professional. But in front of goal, whether it be decision making or just his passing, his shooting, he just seems a little bit off. And I wonder, is this the club looking for a bigger sample size this season from himself and Virgil, maybe before making that decision and committing to 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, really, because I had a bit of stick recently for kind of pointing out that there's an element of risk involved in giving Salah 3 years. But I think it's so easy for us from the outside to get so tied up in the emotion of, he starts the season like a house on fire. He's been absolutely sensational for years and years for Liverpool, one of the best players in the world, probably top 5, top 3 in that time. He's been that good. And Liverpool's so fortunate to have him. But you can't give out a contract that is based on what he has done before. So the what Liverpool have to work out here is, what is he going to give you over the next 3 years? I mean, a 3-year contract, the reason I say that is a huge risk as well is it's essentially 4 from this point, isn't it? Because he's got to get to the end of this season, then you're giving him 3 extra. And if you see any small signs of decline, like you say, I mean, these last couple of performances, not fantastic or not quite as the high level that we'd seen in the games before that. And so Liverpool have to really work out, okay, is he just having those up and down moments in a season, which happened even when he was at his peak, or is this indicative of something kind of happening here? Is his output going to sort of drop off a little bit? And if it is, how much is it going to drop off? How much can we afford to give him? Can we still squeeze another good 2 years out of him, where we get some, we rotate him and we make sure we really look after him? That is the question that Liverpool have got to answer. And I really, really don't envy them in doing that. But for me, that is why there's a risk there, because you can forget that these players can at some point start to perform poorly, or start to perform at not a level that they had previously. And that comes for absolutely every player. I don't care how in shape you keep yourself, or, you look at Ronaldo, for example, and the way that he started to have a negative impact on teams, even though he was scoring goals. This is what you've got to protect yourselves against. And I hate kind of speaking ill of Mo Salah, because he's brought so much joy to Liverpool supporters. It's been an absolute privilege to watch him. But you just have to be careful not to get tied up in that emotion when you're making this decision. And that's what Liverpool will be doing at the moment, is assessing that. And they've got to make a cold-headed business decision. And I'm not entirely sure which way they're going to go on that one.
It's interesting to me because now, for the first time in a long time, I feel he has competition in Federico Chiesa, and usually competition pushes the levels up, inspires the guys to know someone's breathing down their neck. So I'm interested to see how it works out over the next couple of weeks and months. To tie this all together, I guess we should probably come back to our captain, Virgil van Dijk, who's also in a similar position. I think personally, and again, as you said, and rightly so, as fans, we want everybody to be given new deals. We want them all to stay forever. But with Virgil, I really do feel that risk is probably less than Salah for a drop-off, because of the way he plays the position. Doesn't naturally rely on pace as much. dominant aerially, a very good reader of the game, a leader of the back line as well. I think the risk is probably a little bit less for Virgil for me, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts on it.
Yep, I agree. I do think that kind of drop off is more prevalent and more sudden in forwards than it is in defenders, because you can get away with using your nous a little bit more as a defender. I think Van Dijk's still quick, but he's not utterly reliant on it because he reads the game really well. And we've seen centre halves play for much longer. So that evidence is there to back up that, that's it feels an easier contract to give out. And also you factor in he's a big earner, don't get me wrong, but he's on a lot less money than Mo Salah. So I think that makes that an easier one to give, definitely, because he can, he'd be so helpful, even if you think in 2 years' time you'd be reducing his games in comparison to now, and that probably will have to happen at some point. Having someone like him around to effectively coach Quansah and help him grow as a defender, I think is massively helpful. And I mean that's true also of Salah, but I thought so his brilliance is so based on his yes, the way he looks after himself, but it's just pure talent. Whereas for Van Dijk, I think there are tricks of the trade to defending that I think will be really helpful. He can pass on. So I think for me, that's an easier one to give out. But again, all those things Liverpool have got to factor in. Is there a decline coming? Are we seeing any drop off in his physical numbers that makes us think this is going to get worse or is going to drop off a cliff suddenly? That's the decision for them to make. And I'd love to see the numbers and how they make those decisions. But it's going to be an interesting one, which side they come down on with that.
For me, if I'm to talk about one of Virgil's attributes that I admire the most, it's making the forward make the decision. He doesn't give them an easy out, does he? He doesn't overcommit. He always makes them think, last second, and then before you know it, he's on top of you and he's dispossessed you. I could watch Virgil defend all day. I mean, we've both been lucky enough to grow up in an era of centre-backs in the Premier League where you've seen the likes of Rio Ferdinand and just Rolls Royces of players. And with him, again, with Virgil van Dijk, it is just nous more than anything. So I feel, like I mentioned, he can go on for a few more years. Wednesday and the visit of West Ham in the League Cup, I just wanted to really touch on before we have a talk about the loan players. How many changes you think we're going to see for this game? Obviously, Chiesa maybe getting a start would be something we'd be all looking at. You would see Kelleher to keep his position, maybe Bradley come in, Quansah come in. I'm wondering, is there any minutes there for Tyler Morton or Trainioni as an example? I mean, your thoughts ahead of the game against West Ham?
Yeah, I think there's scope for an awful lot of changes because the quality of the player that's been left on the bench for Liverpool at the moment is just crazy, really. The lads who can't get a look in. So it's not a case of changing for the sake of changing, really, or just to kind of throw the League Cup out the window. I just think you could name an incredibly strong starting 11, even with making 9 or 10 changes, to be honest. I mean, Conor Bradley, we've barely seen him this season. He is an unbelievable player. Jarell Quansah, the same, was in the Liverpool team back end of last season. I thought Tsimikas did a very good job in Milan and is there to be a backup to keep Robertson fresh. He can come in. Like you say, Chiesa, everyone's excited to see him. And is this, after he's had that 20 minutes there, is that to build him up to maybe start this one and maybe play an hour, hopefully so. Jota, obviously, kicked out the team by Nunez in the last game. Does he come back in? So you could make changes all across the park and still name a really, really strong starting 11. So I hope, because we've seen very little rotation so far, I kind of hope that is the case and there is sweeping changes. I think it will make it a little bit trickier against it, because rhythm-wise, and against a West Ham side who are looking to kind of bounce back immediately after a disappointing result. But I would like to see that just to kind of protect everyone, keep everyone fresh. And I think even if there's a lack of rhythm there and you do make a lot of changes, I still think the Anfield factor should massively help Liverpool. And West Ham don't look great either, do they? So, I'd like to see quite a few changes, to be honest.
The one area for me where I really think we need to rotate is the middle. We've had this great settled midfield three of Gravenberch, Szoboszlai, McAllister. We've not seen many minutes for Endo. We've got Trainioni, Tyler Morton, Curtis Jones come back in. I do feel that's the one area personally for me that I would like to see Arne Slot rotate. And of course, neither of us have mentioned Joe Gomez. Joe needs to get some minutes this season as well. I've seen a really weird link with him and Inter Milan. I don't know if you've seen that over the last few days, David. They've been linked to quite a few of our defenders in the last week or two. Jarell Quansah before that. I do have a special thought for Joe and all of this because he must be a little bit frustrated, to say the least. He's not really getting the opportunities, and I hope we don't lose him because he's like a Swiss Army knife, isn't he? You can trust him to do anything across the back line.
Yeah, I mean, the fact there's interest in him speaks to the fact that Liverpool, we're open to the idea of selling him. I thought very much that he's open to the idea of leaving. Like you say, I kind of wouldn't like that to happen in the middle of the season, particularly if Liverpool are going well and there's a chance for them to win something. Can they just say to him, "Look, stay till the end of this season, and then let's agree on that you can go somewhere and we can do that deal." And I certainly wouldn't like to see him let go if Liverpool weren't to bring someone in as well. I think that's absolutely crucial. I mean, he's so versatile, can play all across that back line, can't he? So I think you need a player like that, particularly if you start to pick up injuries. So I think a chance for him on Wednesday. I'd love to see him in the starting 11. I'd almost expect to do so as well, maybe at centre half. So I hope that happens. And yeah, hopefully there are enough games to kind of keep him happy over the course of this season. And then I think would be a time really where we would move on and leave with everyone's best wishes.
Just before we finish up, just a little look at some of the players who are out on loan. We've seen Stefan Bajcetic obviously head over to Salzburg to join up with Pep Linders for the season. 2 starts for him this week in the Champions League. They were beaten, but he played, I think, 70, 78 minutes. Again, 0-0 draw in the league in the league over in Austria with Pep Linders. Again, another 70, 78 minutes in his legs. We've also seen Mamardashvili have a man of the match performance in Valencia's 2-0 victory over Girona, making a couple of big saves. And then from the sublime to the ridiculous, Owen Beck getting sent off for Blackburn and bitten in the same game. So at least with Stefan, he's going over and achieving what we want them to do, David, which is getting minutes in the legs.
That's it. That was the sense really behind getting him out there, is that how many minutes has he played so far this season versus how many would he have if he was at Liverpool. Obviously, he's a hugely talented player, and we want to see him get back to his best. But he probably wouldn't have done that if he'd have stayed at Liverpool for this season. I think that was ultimately the best move for him, is to get him out playing minutes. So great to see he's doing that. And I've seen a couple of clips of him as well, so he's looking fairly sharp as well. So that is really, really good to see. So I hope he can continue in that. And yeah, Mamardashvili, interesting that he's had a bit of a man of the match performance there as well, and kind of seems to keep throwing those up this season in a week, in a week where Alisson is out through injury. That is that going to be a growing concern for Liverpool going forward, that Alisson's injuries start, and he already gets a few, they start to come more and more? Is that one of the key reasons why they look for a Mamardashvili? They want to get ahead of any potential problems they have in the goalkeeping department by bringing in someone who's so impressive, and he certainly looks it. And and I know in Beck, that's a pretty interesting one. We're used to the Liverpool players doing the biting in recent history, so an interesting take on that. But it's not exactly something you want to see. But I'm sure he'll be able to walk that one off, and I'm sure the lad who did it is probably in for a lengthy ban.
Yeah, it was interesting to say the least. I mean, we're just about to finish up, but I just wanted to say, as always, thank you for coming on, David, and give you a chance to let people know what you're going to be doing for the week ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to do on my YouTube, actually probably be out this evening. I'm going to do a team selector, so I'm going to go through what I think the team's going to be like for Wednesday. And I'll probably be really wrong, but I'll give it a go. And as usual, if guys want to find news and features and coverage on my Substack, that would be much appreciated.
David, it's always a pleasure catching up with you, my friend, and we'll be chatting again on Thursday after the West Ham game. So until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching and listening. Our thanks to David Lynch, of course, as well. Don't forget to check out his Substack and, of course, David Lynch YouTube channel. We'll be back soon. Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.